Hey guys, tonight we drift into something big, but we're going to do it slowly, almost like you're sinking into a warm pool where the surface noise of the day finally stops chasing you. You're lying there, maybe already half under your blanket, and a soft glow, whether from a lamp or the last leftovers of sunset outside your window, reminds you that light is always doing its quiet work on you. You don't even notice how naturally your shoulders start to drop when you turn your attention towards something bigger than whatever tiny chaos followed you around today. And so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I share here. I love knowing where you're listening from, so feel free to drop your location and your local time in the comments. Now, lower the lights, maybe switch on a fan for a gentle hum, and let's settle into tonight's journey together. You let your eyelids rest a little heavier, but not all the way shut. You imagine the room around you softening at the edges, almost like the shadows are stretching out to make space for your mind to wander. In this relaxed state, your awareness pulls back from the familiar clutter of your life and lifts towards something quieter, older, and much more stable than anything you dealt with today. You feel this subtle shift, like your thoughts are stepping out onto an empty road at night, where the world finally goes still enough for you to hear yourself think. Or not think, which is sometimes even better. As your breathing settles into a slow, soft rhythm, you picture the sun, not the blazing, overwhelming version that blinds you if you look at it for more than a second, but a gentler, almost watercolor sun rising behind distant hills. You imagine this glow arriving the way a whisper does, not demanding anything, just revealing itself. Even though you see the sun every day, you rarely let yourself feel how enormous it is compared to you. And honestly, how could you? Your brain evolved to judge things like how far your coffee mug is from your hand, not how wide a star is. You'd have to be some kind of mathematical wizard to hold all those numbers in your head without it feeling like homework. Instead, you let the feeling settle in naturally without forcing details. You're just sensing scale, not calculating it. Even now, while you're lying there, the sunlight that kept you awake earlier didn't just appear because it's morning where you live. It traveled patiently for 8 minutes and 20 seconds before it brushed against your skin. By the time a beam of sunlight finally lands on you, the event that created it has already been over for longer than it takes to warm up a slice of pizza in a microwave. It's a little surreal if you think about it. You're constantly touched by something that began far away and long ago, and you never even blink at the idea. It's like receiving a postcard from a friend who mailed it weeks earlier, but it doesn't matter because the message is still warm when it arrives. You feel the weight of that idea, not in a dramatic way, but in the way a quiet truth settles into your chest and just rests there. Light isn't hurried or rushed. It doesn't care about your schedule or the things you forgot to do today. It just moves with perfect consistency, crossing impossible distances to land gently on your face every morning. And when you let yourself shift into that awareness, everything in your life that feels big and immediate suddenly becomes a little softer, a little further away. When you think about the sun, it's easy to imagine it as this oversized lamp hanging in the sky just for humans, like the universe installed it for our convenience. But if you zoom out in your mind, the sun reveals itself as a massive, furious sphere of nuclear fire, burning at millions of degrees, so huge that a million Earth could fit inside. And somehow, instead of that being terrifying, it's comforting. Because it's stable, predictable, older than any worry you've ever had, and far more patient than anyone you've ever met. As you picture it, let the details become soft rather than overwhelming. The sun doesn't need your attention to function. It doesn't care if you know the exact temperature of its core or how fast it spins. It just exists, humming through its fusion cycles like a quiet cosmic engine. Somewhere deep in its heart, tiny particles are being crushed together into new elements, releasing energy that takes tens of thousands of years to make its way to the surface. That means the sunlight warming your skin today started its journey before humans even understood fire. That alone could be a whole bedtime story. The funny thing is, the sun doesn't even have a solid surface. You can't stand on it. It's nothing but plasma swirling and boiling in chaotic loops and currents. Yet compared to the wildness inside, the outside, the part we see, is surprisingly calm, like a lake that looks smooth from far away, even though there are entire worlds of movement beneath. And even with storms and flares shooting out, the sun still manages to hold this perfectly round shape, smoother than a billiard ball if you scaled it down. That roundness is a kind of cosmic self-care routine that gravity insists on. You keep drifting deeper into the narration, letting the details pass through you instead of sticking like school facts. You're here for the feeling of it, not the test later. And the feeling is this growing awareness. You are tiny compared to the sun, not in an insignificant way, but in a beautifully balanced way. Tiny things can be precise. Tiny things can be delicate. Tiny things can be aware in ways stars can't be. The sun may be massive, but you're the one listening, perceiving, thinking. There's something powerful in that contrast. A soft joke slips into your thoughts as you imagine yourself standing next to the sun, looking up at this impossible sphere and saying something like, "Okay, you win." The way someone admits defeat in a pillow fight with a toddler who suddenly found superhuman strength. And the sun doesn't brag. It just keeps shining as if to say, "Look, I'm not trying to flex. I'm just doing my job." But what you feel isn't smallness. It's perspective. The kind that makes room in your chest. The kind that loosens something you didn't realize you were holding tight. The sun, in all its enormity, becomes a reference point that lets you step back from your own thoughts. And even though you're tiny compared to it, your ability to observe, to wonder, to imagine this scene at all is something astonishing in its own right. Stars burn. You reflect. That's not nothing. You imagine floating just a little above your bed now, like your awareness slipped out of your body and is hovering calmly a few inches above you. You're still anchored, still safe, but there's a lightness to how you're experiencing the world. The hum of your fan joins the background like a soft companion in the room. The air feels cooler where it touches your exposed skin. And somewhere beneath all of this, your mind keeps circling back to the sun, not as a scientific object, not as a danger, not as a symbol, but as a quiet reminder that scale can be soothing. Stars don't worry. Stars don't rush. Stars don't second-guess themselves. They simply are. And you, in this moment, get to step into that quiet certainty, letting the vastness of the universe become a blanket instead of question. You feel the narration gently nudging you toward the next step, not with pressure, but with curiosity, guiding you to continue drifting into this story as it unfolds. You ease forward from the calm you were settling into, letting the previous feeling linger like the warmth left on your pillow when you roll to one side. The sun still hangs in your mind, but now it draws you closer to an even more intimate comparison, something small and grounded, something you can hold. You picture yourself standing barefoot in a wide, quiet desert at dusk, the kind of place where the sky doesn't just stretch overhead, but seems to spill over the horizon in every direction. The sand under your feet is cool where the day's heat finally surrendered, and when you crouch down, you pinch a single grain of sand between your fingers. It's barely anything, a speck. You could lose it with a breath. You lift that grain close to your eye. It's tiny, insignificant, but for a moment it becomes the stand-in for your sense of self. Not in a sad way, more like a reset button. You're a grain, sitting in a desert so wide you can't see the end of it. But even that is nothing compared to the scale of the star watching over you. The sun, somewhere beyond those fading pink clouds, would make this entire desert look smaller than a flake of dust on a window pane. That's the contrast. You, the grain, the sun, the desert, and yet you're the one trying to understand the whole thing. You feel a small smile tug at you as the image settles. There's something tender about shrinking yourself down on purpose, like you're giving your mind breathing room. The simple act of thinking of yourself as a grain lets everything else in your life feel lighter. The arguments, the deadlines, the texts you haven't answered. They all get gently pushed back by the vast breeze of perspective. Not erased, just put into their proper orbit. Holding that imaginary grain, you straighten up and look outward again. The desert goes on, dunes rising and falling like slow-motion waves. A warm breeze brushes your skin. The sky deepens from gold to lavender. This is where you begin to grasp the emotional version of scale, not by memorizing numbers, but by feeling the difference between something you can hold and something you can never hold. That's the kind of understanding that sinks into your chest rather than your brain. You picture the sun as it would look if you could float above the earth, away from the haze and the dramatic sunsets, and the way the atmosphere tints everything. Up there, the sun isn't yellow. It's white, brilliant and unfiltered, like the brightest LED you've ever seen, but multiplied by everything. It's a star, not a lamp, and it radiates in every direction, not caring where you're standing. It simply shines because that's what stars do. You feel the simplicity in that. There's no drama behind it, no intention, no anxiety. Fusion happens. Light escapes. Energy travels. And eventually, after all the chaos and heat, some of those photons end up touching the surface of your hand on a random afternoon while you're waiting for your coffee order. You let your imagination drift closer to the sun, but gently. You don't need to dive into the blazing surface. You just move toward it enough to sense how much space it actually takes up. You imagine the earth shrinking behind you as you drift. Your room, your city, your continent, they've already vanished. Earth looks like a marble, then like a dot, then like nothing at all. Meanwhile, the sun swells in your vision, growing from a circle to an enormous, luminous sphere so wide that if you try to fly around it in a jet, you'd need months. The closer you get, the larger it becomes, until it fills your view so completely that you can't see around it anymore. It's ridiculous, almost comical, how big it is compared to you. A quiet laugh escapes your imagination, the kind you might make if you dropped your phone and then realized it somehow landed perfectly on a soft cushion instead of smashing into the floor. There's humor in realizing how wrong your instincts are about size. The sun looks manageable from Earth. You draw it in notebooks. You scribble a little circle with rays and call it a day. But if you try to draw it at true scale, you'd need a pen the size of a tree and a sheet of paper bigger than a football stadium. And even then, it wouldn't be enough. As you float there, suspended somewhere in the vast stretch of space, a simple fact lands softly. Compared to the sun, you're almost nothing. But that feeling doesn't sting. It's freeing. The world doesn't expect you to be as big as a star. You don't need to carry everything. You don't need to shine constantly. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to be small and still matter. The emptiness of space around you adds to the calm. There's no noise, no deadlines, no notifications, just a soft, endless black that feels more like velvet than void. And through that quiet, you feel one of those quirky truths drift in, the kind of detail that makes the universe feel playful rather than intimidating. The sun hums. Literally, it vibrates with sound waves deep inside it. You can't hear them with your ears, and even if you could, space wouldn't carry the sound, but the sun rings like a colossal cosmic bell. Scientists have studied those vibrations to understand what's happening inside, like tapping a watermelon and listening for the hollow echo. It's weirdly charming to imagine the sun singing in a frequency far too low for humans to hear, as if the universe is humming a bass line under everything. But then another thought follows, one of those open-ended cosmic debates that scientists still wrestle with. We know a lot about the sun, but we still don't fully understand how some of its layers transfer heat. The outer atmosphere, called the corona, gets hotter than the surface, which is like the air above a campfire being way hotter than the actual flames. It shouldn't work that way, and yet it does. Researchers argue about which theories explain it best, but no one has fully solved it. It's a mystery wrapped in plasma, and mysteries like that remind you that even the most familiar star in your life is still deeply strange, still deserving of wonder. The idea that the sun is puzzling at all makes you feel oddly aligned. You don't need to have everything figured out either. You, like the sun, can be radiant and confusing at the same time. There's something comforting in the symmetry of that. Your awareness drifts back to the desert scene. The grain of sand is still in your hand, and the sun dips lower, brushing the horizon with a muted fire that only looks gentle because you're so far away. You let the grain slip from your fingers. It falls back into the desert, joining billions of other grains exactly like it. The wind shifts and moves them around, reshaping the surface in patterns so slow and subtle you'd only notice them if you stayed for hours. You can feel that same slow rearranging happening inside you while you listen. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, like dunes shifting under the influence of a gentle wind. You don't have to force the meaning of anything tonight. You just need to let the sensation of scale reset your mind, smoothing out the places where worry piled too high. The sun becomes less of a monster of heat and size and more of a reference point that helps you breathe in a steadier rhythm. You know it's huge, impossibly huge, but you also know that you're allowed to feel held by that bigness instead of overwhelmed. It's like leaning back against a warm wall. You don't need to understand its construction to enjoy the support. You linger in that feeling, letting the contrast settle. A grain before a star, small but aware, tiny but conscious, drifting on a planet that circles this glowing giant with perfect consistency. And as that image settles deeper, the story keeps opening ahead of you, ready to guide you even further into perspective. You let the desert fade gently, like someone lowering a dimmer switch until only the feeling of open space remains. Your body is still where it was, tucked into blankets or stretched comfortably across your mattress, but your mind drifts upward again, rising into that soft imaginary orbit where scale becomes a thing you feel instead of something you measure. Up here, the sun doesn't look like a watercolor on the horizon anymore. It looks like a presence, a brilliant sphere that pours light in every direction without hesitation, without pause, without ever asking whether anyone is even watching. And this is where another layer of perspective unfolds. When you lift your hand into sunlight, the warmth you feel is old. Not ancient in a dusty history book way, but old in a very specific, oddly poetic sense. Every beam of sunlight touching you right now began its journey over 8 minutes ago. 8 minutes and 20 seconds, to be exact, but it's enough to say 8 minutes and let the idea settle. It means the moment you feel sunlight, you're receiving something that has been traveling toward you at the fastest speed allowed in the universe. And it still took longer than the time between hitting start on a microwave and hearing the beep. You imagine yourself standing somewhere quiet, maybe on a hill or a rooftop or just by a window, and lifting your face toward the sun. The warmth arrives a little late, always. Not because the sun is lazy, but because distance is unapologetically massive. Even traveling at light speed, photons need 8 whole minutes to reach you. And somehow, the fact that they make it at all feels like the sweetest kind of persistence. Little packets of energy leaving a star, determined to complete their journey across 150 million kilometers just to brush your skin. You let the thoughts slow your breathing, the way calming facts sometimes do. It's strangely intimate to realize you're always feeling the past when sunlight hits you. Everything you see, the glow on buildings, the shimmer off water, the soft illusion of morning light creeping across your bed sheets, is a delayed message from a star. It's like the universe has its own postal system, and the sun is always writing you letters in light. You drift a little closer to that idea, imagining those photons as tiny travelers. In reality, they're born deep inside the sun, squeezed out of nuclear fusion like little sparks trying to find an exit. And here's the wild part. The quirky, science is weird but wonderful part you weren't expecting. The photons you feel today weren't created 8 minutes ago. They were created hundreds of thousands of years ago. They've been bouncing around inside the sun, ricocheting from particle to particle in a chaotic maze, losing their identity again and again as they slowly fight their way outward. It takes them so long to escape the sun's dense interior that humanity was still carving early symbols into stone when the energy that warms your face today first came into existence. You pause, letting that timeline stretch out inside you. A photon's journey is absurdly long on the inside, but unbelievably fast once it breaks free. It's like someone stuck in traffic for centuries, then hitting open highway and flooring it. And when it reaches Earth, after all that turmoil, it lands with the softest possible touch. A warm patch on your skin, a glint on a leaf, a shimmer across a window. If the universe is a storyteller, it has a serious talent for understatement. There's a certain quiet humor in knowing that light itself has better patience than most of us do on a typical Monday morning. You picture a photon trying to make its way through the sun's interior, thinking, if I can just get past this one proton, I might. Nope. Never mind. Back to the beginning. And it repeats that for epochs until finally, it reaches open space. If light had emotions, that first moment of freedom would probably be the cosmic equivalent of taking your shoes off after a 12-hour shift. But then your mind shifts to something more contemplative, something scientists still don't fully understand. Even though the sun gives us the same amount of light every single day, we don't fully grasp how consistent that output truly is over very long timescales. There's an ongoing debate about solar variability, about how much the sun's brightness changes across centuries or millennia, and how those subtle shifts ripple into Earth's climate. It's one of those questions where the more data we gather, the more delicate the answer becomes. And it reminds you that even the brightest thing in our sky isn't fully solved. A star can be steady and still mysterious, like someone you've known your whole life, but occasionally learn something new about. You drift back into the main, feeling as the section pulls you deeper. 8 minutes. That's the heart of this chapter. How long it takes for sunlight to reach you. It's the cosmic commute time. It means everything you see is slightly outdated. The sun you look at is not the sun that exists at that exact moment. If the sun were to disappear, don't worry, it won't. This is just imagination. You wouldn't know for over 8 minutes. For 8 minutes, Earth would be lit by a star that no longer exists. It's a strange, eerie detail, slightly unsettling, but also kind of enchanting. Light lets us live in a constantly updated world, but its updates come at the speed of 8 minutes. Faster than anything else, but still a delay. You take that delay and let it soften your sense of urgency. Humans are in such a hurry. We want instant replies, instant results, instant comfort. Meanwhile, the entire solar system operates on the principle that nothing truly worth receiving arrives immediately. Light doesn't. Seasons don't. Planetary motion doesn't. Even the rhythm of your own body follows cycles measured in slow waves, circadian patterns gently tuned to the rise and fall of sunlight. You picture yourself lying back with your hands behind your head, watching light pour over Earth from above. You imagine every beam stretching like a thread across the void, weaving warmth and color and visibility into the fabric of life. It doesn't matter that the thread was spun long ago. What matters is that it arrives exactly when you need it and never with the slightest attitude. There's a joke hiding in that thought, something dry and gentle, the sort of joke you'd make to a friend while half asleep on a long car ride. You imagine sunlight saying, "Look, I started this journey before your entire civilization figured out indoor plumbing. I'm doing my best." And you, squinting at the brightness, mumble back, yeah, thanks. Could you maybe tone it down a little at noon?" But light just keeps pouring in, completely ignoring your sass. You let that playfulness fade into a warmer, quieter realization. The sun is stable, consistent, and utterly indifferent to your anxieties. You can be overwhelmed, confused, running late, running behind, unsure of everything, and the sun still sends its light right on schedule. It doesn't demand that you keep up. It doesn't ask for perfection. It just shows up. Every day, 8 minutes late. And somehow, that lateness feels like the most comforting thing of all. You drift in that feeling for a moment, noticing how your breathing deepens when you consider the patience built into the universe. You don't have to match the speed of light. You don't have to outshine anything. All you have to do is receive, quietly, gently, the way Earth receives sunlight. And as you rest in that glow, the story continues its slow unfolding, guiding you toward the next layer of scale and softness waiting ahead. You let the 8-minute sunlight drift away like the last echo of a dream. And now your mind slips into something a little more playful, something you can feel in your body rather than just imagine. You picture yourself standing beside an ordinary car, not a spaceship, not a futuristic hovercraft, just a regular, slightly dusty, maybe a bit too familiar car you take on a weekend road trip. The kind of car with a few crumbs in the cup holders and a sun visor that squeaks when you pull it down. It's parked at the edge of a long, straight road that stretches toward the horizon where dawn is barely beginning to warm the sky. And as you look down that endless stripe of asphalt, you let yourself entertain the most impossible idea in the softest, sleepiest way. What if this road led straight to the sun? Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally, a highway right through the sky. No traffic, no speed limits, no police hiding behind interstellar billboards. Just you, your car, and a destination so bright you can't look at it directly. The thought alone makes you smile, because it's so absurd and yet so comforting. It's a scale you can wrap your mind around. A road, a car, a journey. You open the door, slide into the seat, and feel that familiar softness of the cushion beneath you. You click the seatbelt even though you're about to violate every known law of physics. Some habits just stick. You turn the key or press the button. It doesn't matter which, your imagination fills in the details, and the engine hums awake. The dashboard lights glow softly in the dimness. For a moment you sit there, hands on the wheel, feeling the silliness and sincerity of what you're about to attempt. You ease your foot onto the gas pedal, not rushing, just letting the car roll forward the way you might pull out of a quiet driveway early in the morning. The road ahead rises off the ground like a ramp, climbing gently into the sky. You barely notice the tilt as gravity becomes a suggestion rather than a rule. And soon the world you know drops away beneath you. Your house, your city, the landscape you think is permanent. All of it fading as you ascend. You don't feel fear, just a spreading stillness inside you, like your thoughts are losing weight as Earth shrinks behind you. The moment the car levels out, floating along that impossible road, you glance at your speedometer. You're going 100 kilometers per hour, highway speed. Nothing impressive, nothing superhuman, just the same pace you take when running errands. And with that speed locked in your mind, the absurd scale of the universe begins to settle around you. At 100 kilometers per hour, how long would it take you to reach the sun? A day? 2 days? A month? You smile because the answer is beautifully, hilariously disproportionate. At highway speed, it would take you over 170 years. You could start driving right now, and you would never reach the sun in your own lifetime. Your children wouldn't reach it. Your grandchildren might still be in the middle of the journey when they grew old. Generations would pass in that car, handing down the steering wheel like an heirloom. That's how far the sun really is. Not up in the sky, not super far away, but so far you could drive nonstop from now until the year 2200 and only then be rolling into the blinding glow of the photosphere. You let that number settle in your chest like a warm stone. It's ridiculous and profound all at once. We live our whole lives thinking the sun is close because we see it every day, but in reality, it's a destination that requires a dynasty to reach at normal human speed. And somehow, the fact that light makes that trip in 8 minutes while you would need centuries becomes funny in the gentle, cosmic sense of humor the universe specializes in. You picture a photon zooming past your car on the road, blurring by at light speed, shouting something like, "Good luck with the next 2 centuries." Your subconscious snorts at the idea, A soft, tired laugh, the kind you make when you're too sleepy to resist amusement. The universe isn't mocking you, though, not even a little. It's reminding you that scale is something you can approach with wonder instead of panic. You don't have to outrun light. You don't have to catch up to anything. You're just a passenger on a slow-moving planet that happens to orbit a star with perfect, gentle patience. As the imaginary road unfurls beneath your tires, space stretches into a smooth, quiet expanse. There's no wind, no friction, no sound except the soft hum of the engine, which you realize is only there because your mind insists on giving you something familiar to hold on to. Deep space doesn't carry sound at all. It's too empty, too still. But your brain provides a comforting background noise anyway, like a friend who sits beside you without saying anything, just so you don't feel alone. You pass Earth's orbit markers in your mind. You drift by the orbit of the moon in a few hours. Mars after months. Jupiter after more than a year. But no matter how far you've gone, the sun still hangs ahead like a glowing coin that refuses to get larger. That's the trick of distance. Until you're incredibly close, the sun stays the same size in the sky. It's already so far beyond your normal sense of scale that the distance you travel barely seems to make a dent. Then a thought drifts in, one of those charmingly odd scientific tidbits. If you really did drive a car in space, your tires wouldn't work. They need friction to turn the car forward. You'd step on the gas and just float in place like someone trying to run on ice wearing socks. You need rockets or thrusters or some kind of propulsion system that doesn't exist in your garage. But the image of a regular car rolling calmly through space is so cozy that your brain refuses to let physics ruin it. So it doesn't. It keeps the car exactly as you imagine it. Gentle, steady, obedient. And as you glide forward, a bigger, more philosophical question whispers in from the edges of scientific debates. We know the average distance from Earth to the Sun is about 150 million kilometers, but that number isn't fixed. Earth doesn't orbit in a perfect circle. It moves in an ellipse. Some years the variation is subtle, but over long periods, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, the shape of the orbit changes. Scientists still discuss how much these orbital fluctuations influence ice ages, climate patterns, and the stability of conditions for life. The answers are complicated, layered, still unfolding. The universe loves a mystery, especially the kind that takes generations to untangle. And that's fitting, considering your imaginary car ride would also take generations. But you don't stress about any of that. The details drift by like scenery outside a window. You're not collecting facts, you're collecting feelings. The feeling of distance. The feeling of being small but safe. The feeling of being carried along a path you don't need to navigate alone. And as that sensation deepens, you start to understand something unspoken. You don't need to reach the sun for this journey to matter. You just need the rhythm of the movement, the direction, the perspective. The road becomes smoother now, so smooth it feels like floating. The sun ahead begins to swell a little larger, but only by a hair. And in that subtle brightening, you feel something like a soft exhale inside your chest. A release. Because if the universe is this big, if the sun is this far, if the journey is this long, then the pressure you put on yourself in daily life can loosen a little. You're not supposed to know everything, accomplish everything, or race at impossible speeds. You're supposed to exist, to move at the pace of your own life, to take the road one quiet moment at a time. You imagine yourself resting one hand out the car window, feeling nothing but the suggestion of motion. In the corner of your vision, the stars stretch out like silver dust scattered across black velvet. The sun glows ahead like a promise that requires no hurry. You let that promise settle, knowing that the story isn't done. The road continues, opening into more secrets of scale, more comfort hidden in cosmic distances. And you keep driving. You keep driving down that impossible cosmic highway, letting the gentle hum of the engine and the glow of the sun ahead tug you forward with no sense of urgency. You feel yourself settling even deeper into that soft, drifting state where thoughts stretch out slowly, like warm taffy. And as you float along that road, the next layer of scale arrives quietly, almost shyly, like a fact that doesn't want to overwhelm you. 1,000,000 Earths. That's how many could fit inside the sun. Not metaphorically, literally. If the sun were hollow, don't worry, it's not. And you could drop Earths into it like marbles into a glass jar. You need 1,000,000 of them to fill the space. The number is ridiculous. It's the kind of number your mind laughs at, not because it's funny, but because it refuses to wrap itself around something so huge. So instead of trying to force understanding, you shift into a gentler imagination, something that lets your brain relax its grip. You picture yourself holding a marble, smooth, cool, perfectly sized to roll across your palm. That marble is Earth. Tiny, delicate, familiar. And now you imagine walking into a large, echoing auditorium where someone has placed a giant sphere in the center, a glowing yellow orb the size of a house. That's the sun at a smaller scale. You stand there with your marble Earth and just look at the difference. It's not subtle. It's the kind of comparison that makes you instinctively whisper, okay, even if no one else is around. You approach the giant glowing sun sphere, holding your little marble, and you try to picture stacking those marbles inside the larger one. You place one, then another, then a few hundred, until the absurdity sets in. You be doing this all night, all month, all year. You need 1,000,000 of them, and the thought becomes so silly that a hint of a smile warms your face. The universe doesn't do reasonable scale. It does absolutely unhinged. Good luck comprehending the scale. And yet it presents this magnitude so calmly, like it's the most normal thing in the world. You let your imagination drift closer to the surface of that giant glowing sphere. Up close, the sun doesn't look smooth at all. It looks like boiling honey mixed with gold, roiling and churning, constantly reshaping itself. Granules the size of continents rise and fall like slow-motion waves, each one glowing brighter at the center and dimmer at the edges. It's mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, like watching a crackling fireplace, but on an unimaginable scale. And even though the patterns are chaotic, there's something rhythmic about them, something soothing in the fact that this enormous, fiery surface is doing what it's done for billions of years without ever losing its balance. Then you let the idea land quietly. The sun is massive enough to hold 1,000,000 Earths, but you don't have to meet it with awe that feels heavy. You can meet it with softness, with sleepy curiosity. The sun isn't demanding reverence. It's just existing the only way a star can exist, by being really, really big and very, very bright. And here you are, floating nearby in a car that has absolutely no business being in space, just observing. You picture the view from your driver's seat now. Earth is far behind you, a tiny jewel fading into the darkness, while the sun fills more of your windshield than before. It doesn't feel threatening. If anything, it feels like a giant fireplace in the distance, radiating warmth you can't quite feel yet. That warmth is massive, though. In real life, if you doubled the sun's brightness, Earth would be scorched. If you dimmed it significantly, our oceans would freeze. Everything you know exists in a balance so delicate it would make a tightrope walker sweat. But the sun doesn't wobble or flicker. It stays in its lane, burning steadily, giving Earth exactly what it needs without ever checking in. You let that balance sink into your body. There's a reminder in it, a quiet message about stability. The universe can be wild, unpredictable, full of forces that could tear planets apart. And yet here is our sun, holding everything steady, keeping orbits smooth, temperatures livable, seasons reliable. There's comfort in that cosmic consistency. A giant star, chaotic on the surface, but dependable over billions of years. And in that dependability, you find the kind of reassurance you didn't realize you needed tonight. A stray thought flutters in, one of those quirky science details that doesn't try to be profound but ends up being delightful anyway. The sun's density, You'd think something so huge would be incredibly solid, but it isn't. The sun is mostly hydrogen and helium, incredibly hot plasma, swirling in layers. So if you could somehow scoop a chunk of the sun, you cannot, but we're being dreamy here. It would be far less dense than Earth. If the sun were a giant balloon, again, terrible idea, but stay with the imagery, it would be surprisingly light for its size. Your marble Earth is heavier, gram for gram, than the glowing house-sized sun in your mental auditorium. That contrast is one of those things that makes scientists grin and shrug, because the universe just doesn't care about matching our expectations. But the part that drifts in even softer is one of those open-ended questions scientists still debate. How stable is the sun over ultra-long time spans? Not centuries or millennia, but millions of years. We know its average brightness is steady, but subtle fluctuations, tiny changes, might have shaped Earth's climate in dramatic ways. Ice ages, warm periods, shifts in ecosystems. We can trace some patterns, but not all. The sun holds secrets inside its swirling plasma, and those secrets take lifetimes to decode. And somehow, the fact that there's still mystery inside something so fundamental feels calming. You don't need every answer to feel safe. You can rest in the mystery. You drift deeper into your seat, letting the cosmic auditorium dissolve and returning to the road through space. The sun grows larger, its details clearer. You can almost feel the faintest heat reaching through the cosmic vacuum, even though your imagination keeps you comfortably cool inside your car. You rest one hand on the wheel and lean back, the thoughts settling into that sleepy space between understanding and dreaming. A million Earths. The idea isn't here to intimidate you. It's here to make everything else feel manageable. Whatever filled your day, whatever stress tried to stake a claim in your mind, feels small in the presence of something this vast and steady. Not insignificant, just right-sized. You don't need to carry the world. You don't need to be a star. You're allowed to exist as a tiny, aware being tucked somewhere inside this giant cosmic dance. You picture those million Earths again, not scattered, not overwhelmed, but floating peacefully inside the sun, each one a marble, each one glowing softly. You're one of those marbles. Not the biggest, not the brightest, not the loudest, but awake, listening, thinking, feeling. The sun can swallow a million Earths, but can't do what you're doing right now. It can't be conscious. It can't wonder. It can't rest. That's your scale, not in size, but in awareness. You let that truth warm you even more gently than sunlight ever could. And with that, you keep moving down the road, the sun waiting ahead, impossibly huge, but somehow soft enough to carry you deeper into the journey. You settle back into that drifting state, the way you do when you're half asleep on a long ride and the world outside the window turns into one slow-moving blur. The sun grows a little larger through your imaginary windshield. Not rushing, just gently expanding its presence the way a fireplace fills a room with warmth even before you get close. And now, instead of staying at the surface, your mind begins to drift inward, down through the shining layers, toward the place where every beam of sunlight begins its long, wandering life. You don't dive quickly. You ease into it, the way you'd walk into warm water one step at a time, letting the sensation rise around you without shock or hurry. Inside the sun, everything becomes different. The calm, honey-colored surface you saw from afar gives way to a world that doesn't behave like anything on Earth. There's no solid ground, no air the way you understand it. There's only plasma, a glowing soup of charged particles moving in slow, powerful currents. And beneath the surface, beneath the granules and the roiling convection, lies a place so intense that even your imagination instinctively lowers its voice. The core, the birthplace of light. You let yourself drift toward it the way you might move toward the center of a warm, dimly lit room. The pressure here is unimaginable. It's so strong that hydrogen atoms, normally quite shy about getting too close to each other, are forced into such tight proximity that they fuse together. It's like the universe's most extreme matchmaking event, where particles are pushed so hard into compatibility that they merge whether they want to or not. And when they do, they release energy, tiny bursts of it, little sparks of existence that start a journey nobody would willingly choose if they had legs to walk away from it. You hover there for a moment, feeling the weight of the environment without being crushed by it. The temperature is in the millions of degrees. The density is beyond anything in your daily life, far greater than rock or metal or anything your hands could hold. And yet, inside your mind, it feels gentle. Not because it's actually gentle, but because you're experiencing it from the safe distance of imagination, where even the wildest physics becomes soft and dreamlike. You let yourself float in this impossible place, watching hydrogen become helium in tiny flashes of light, like sparks thrown off from an anvil in slow motion. Every photon born here begins with chaos. It ricochets violently, bouncing off particles, slamming into atoms, scattering in directions so random that it's almost funny. You picture a newborn photon like a pinball launched into a machine with no exit. It travels a fraction of a millimeter before smashing into something, then another fraction, then again and again, repeating this absurd, jittery dance for hundreds of thousands of years. And all the while, the sun remains calm on the outside, shining with absolute composure, as if nothing chaotic is happening inside. It's the cosmic version of someone looking totally serene during a video call while their dog, their toddler, and a robot vacuum battle in the background. The image makes you exhale a soft, sleepy laugh. The sun has been performing this act for billions of years, constantly converting matter into energy, constantly releasing light that will eventually spill across your planet, touch the ocean, warm the soil, and land on your skin. The scale of it, how much energy is created every second, should be overwhelming, but your mind doesn't treat it that way. It treats it like a slow, steady heartbeat, the kind you can fall asleep listening to. As you drift deeper mentally, you realize something beautifully odd. The core of the sun is the only place this fusion can happen. Outside the core, the temperature and pressure drop off quickly. The rest of the sun is hot and wild, sure, but not wild enough to force atoms into merging. The core is the heart, the engine, the furnace. Every photon, every warm afternoon, every sunrise begins in this tiny region deep inside the star. It's poetic in a way. So much life on Earth depends on a place that no human will ever see firsthand. But then another detail arrives, soft and strange, the kind that makes science feel like a collection of cosmic bedtime stories. Those photons that break free of the core, after hundreds of thousands of years trapped inside the sun, are not the same photons that touched you yesterday or will touch you tomorrow. The light we experience is constantly renewed, constantly cycling, constantly born and reborn inside the sun's core. In a sense, the sun doesn't shine with old light. It shines with fresh energy every moment. The photons that finally escape the surface have survived an obstacle course so long and so absurd that your subconscious wants to pat them on the head and say, "You made it. Good job." You can almost imagine a little photon staggering out of the sun's surface, exhausted from its multi-millennia journey, finally free to sprint across space at full light speed. And the moment it gains that freedom, it races outward like someone who has been stuck in a traffic jam for an entire civilization and then suddenly finds an open road. It doesn't look back. It doesn't slow down. It just runs until it reaches something, Earth, a comet, another planet, or nothing at all. And scientists still debate certain parts of this process. The exact flow of energy in the sun isn't perfectly understood. The layers are too complex, too dense, too opaque for us to observe directly. Helioseismology, the science of listening to the sun's vibrations, has given us clues, allowing us to hear waves that ripple through the star's body. But debates continue about the exact motions of plasma deep inside, the subtle shifts in magnetic fields, the precise mechanisms that carry heat upward. The sun keeps a few secrets, not out of stubbornness, but because some truths take time for us to reach, just like photons do. You drift farther down into the core, or rather you drift into a softer awareness of it. You picture protons nudging each other, merging, releasing energy that starts its long, slow climb outward. You picture neutrinos, tiny, ghost-like particles born in the same reactions, racing away instantly, passing through the sun, through you, through Earth, barely interacting with anything. Trillions of them have passed through your body in the last few seconds, like cosmic raindrops you never feel. It's one of those quirky facts that makes you whisper, weird, even though you're lying in the dark. And then you begin to rise back up through the sun's interior, layer by layer, the way a diver rises from deep water. The density softens. The pressure eases. The temperature, still unimaginable by human standards, begins to drop. The photons continue their chaos, bouncing and scattering, shifting from high-energy gamma rays into softer light as they lose bits of themselves during the long climb. By the time they reach the surface, their visible light, the warm yellow-white glow you know so well. The light of day. The light that wakes you up, grows your food, heats the air, paints sunsets, and fills your windows even on the cloudiest mornings. You break through the surface into the honey-colored granules again, and the light that began in that dense, chaotic furnace finally bursts into space. Free, clean, calm. It travels outward without the slightest resistance now, crossing millions of kilometers in a straight line, unbothered, determined, predictable. And 8 minutes later, some of that light lands on your face. You're covered, every day, in the soft echoes of journey that began deep inside a star before humans even existed. You rest in that image, the scale of it, the patience of it, the warmth of it. Light is born in pressure and chaos, but by the time it reaches you, it's gentle, steady, comforting. It's like the universe goes out of its way to turn something violent into something nurturing by the time it reaches your world. You don't have to fight your way through anything tonight. You're the receiver, not the traveler. All you have to do is exist in the glow. And as you float there in your mind, near the place where light is born, the road ahead begins to open again. The sun waits with more secrets, more scale, more softness, and you drift toward them like someone drifting deeper into sleep. You ease back into that floating road through space, letting the brightness of the sun settle comfortably in your mind rather than overwhelm it. You're closer now, close enough that the sun fills your view like some golden ocean suspended in a vacuum, a surface that looks strangely soft from afar. Not like fire, not like the harsh light that leaks through your curtains in the morning, but like a vast field of swirling, molten silk. And even though you know logically that stars are not gentle, the way your inner world renders this one makes it feel almost touchable, like something you could dip your fingertips into without fear. But the moment you drift closer, just close enough for detail to sharpen, the illusion changes. Not into danger, not into anything frightening, but into pure, mesmerizing motion. The sun's surface isn't really a surface. It's a restless mosaic of plasma cells, each one tugging upward and sinking downward in slow, rolling patterns. You imagine stepping out of your impossible cosmic car and floating just above it, toes dangling over this trembling golden texture. From here, it looks like a pot of water at a low simmer, except each bubbling cell is the size of a continent. You watch one swell upward, glowing brighter at the center where it's hotter, then cool and sink back down at the edges. The whole sun is breathing through these cells, millions of them rising and falling in a cosmic dance. The movement is slow enough to be hypnotic. You could watch it for hours without blinking, lulled by the rhythm. Every cell lasts maybe 10 minutes before dissolving and reforming, like a self-reorganizing quilt made of starlight. And just as you get used to that idea, another layer of motion reveals itself, the sun spins. Not like a solid ball, though, more like honey stirred in a jar. The equator rotates faster than the poles, twisting the magnetic field in complicated tangles that sometimes snap and whip upward in great arcs of plasma. You see one now, a loop of glowing material rising off the surface, curling like a luminous ribbon tens of thousands of kilometers tall. A solar prominence. It's delicate and monstrous at once. You float there, feeling the scale without fear, watching it form in slow motion, like a slow curl of smoke rising from incense. Except this ribbon is big enough to swallow worlds. A strand of thought slides in lazily, the kind of fact your sleepy brain accepts without argument. These prominences are made of plasma, suspended by magnetic fields. They can last for days, sometimes weeks, gently looping through space. They're peaceful until they're not. Sometimes the magnetic fields snap, releasing flares so intense that Earth's ionosphere shudders. It's one of those areas where scientists still debate the exact mechanics. We understand the basics, but not the full pattern, not the precise triggers. The sun keeps some mysteries braided tightly beneath its bright exterior. But the uncertainty doesn't feel like a problem here. It feels like part of the experience, part of the personality of this star you're floating beside. You drift even closer, letting the details sharpen just enough to feel real. Up close, the surface looks like a sea of molten petals shifting in and out of existence. The edges of each granule glow deeper orange, while the centers shine almost white-hot. The temperature variation is only a few hundred degrees, which in the cosmic scale is basically barely noticeable, but visually it creates this stunning pattern you could stare at until sleep pulls you under entirely. You imagine leaning forward, resting your weight on invisible air. But there is no air here. No breeze. No sound. The silence is total, dense, calming. It's funny, in a way, that the loudest thing in the solar system is also the quietest. On Earth, fire crackles. Thunder rumbles. Engines roar. But here, the most powerful, explosive environment you can imagine is absolutely silent. The sun could tear itself open and you wouldn't hear a thing. That contrast tickles some sleepy corner of your mind, enough to make you smile. The universe just loves irony, and yet the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels like being wrapped in a warm, heavy blanket. You float closer still, close enough that the convection patterns beneath you look like blooming flowers, rising and fading in a gentle pulse. There's comfort in the repetition, the constancy. The sun has been performing this exact dance for billions of years, long before your ancestors walked upright, long before Earth even cooled into something resembling a home. That continuity settles deep inside you, the way steady breathing does when you're falling asleep. Each granule dissolving into the next is another reminder that the universe isn't rushing. Nothing here feels panicked or harsh. Even the violent events, the flares, the eruptions, happen with a kind of cosmic grace, like nature stretching rather than striking. A quirky thought drifts in, one you didn't expect. If you could somehow hover just above the sun's surface without instantly becoming plasma dust, you wouldn't actually see a solid line between surface and space. The sun doesn't have a skin. It fades gradually into the solar atmosphere, layers of thinning plasma stretching outward like the veil of a dancer. The photosphere, the layer you're looking at now, isn't a surface at all. It's just the place where light becomes transparent enough to escape. You're not looking at a thing. You're looking at a threshold. That realization tugs you even deeper into the feeling of drifting. You're floating above a threshold that has no true boundary, just a changing opacity where radiation finally lets go. The sun glows not because it has a shell, but because this is the level where the light inside finally stops bouncing around and can fly free. It's strangely poetic, almost like watching thoughts break out of a crowded mind and become words. As you float there, the sun rotates beneath you. You can see the equator moving faster, dragging the plasma around like a lazy carousel. It pulls at something familiar in you, the way you turn in bed, shifting the blankets into new shapes. Nothing in nature is perfectly rigid. Not planets, not stars, not even you. Everything has a rotation with a wobble, a rhythm with a variation. The sun just expresses its wobble on a scale so large you can only appreciate it from this imaginary vantage point. The magnetic fields begin to tangle beneath the surface, and you can almost sense the tension building like a stretch in a muscle before a yawn. When the magnetic lines snap, a flare erupts upward, brilliant, sharp-edged, expanding like an opening flower made of pure radiance. But you don't flinch. You watch it bloom, silent and slow in your perception. The flare curves and dissipates in a shower of charged particles that drift outward, most of them destined to miss Earth entirely. A few will reach the planet, dancing in a magnetic field and painting auroras across the poles like watercolor spilled across the sky. Your eyelids feel heavier at the thought. Auroras born from solar storms. Chaos turned into beauty. That's the sun style, really. Fury softened into poetry by the time it reaches your world. It's a reminder that even intense forces can create calm outcomes. Even disruptive events can become glimmers instead of threats. You take that message in quietly, letting it settle in your chest where the worries of your day used to live. Another debate drifts gently across your thoughts, not sharp or academic, just a whisper from science. How deep do the roots of solar storms reach? Are they triggered by patterns we fully understand, or are there deeper layers of solar dynamo action that remain hidden? Researchers still argue about the complexity of the sun's magnetic cycles, still refining models, still studying the 11-year rhythm of sunspots. And the sun doesn't seem offended by the uncertainty. It keeps rotating, keeps boiling, keeps shining. You imagine yourself reaching out a hand toward the sun, not to touch it, but to acknowledge its presence the way you might hold your hand toward a fireplace. Even without heat in this visualization, you feel warmth in your mind, a psychological warmth that unfurls in your chest and shoulders. The sun may hold a million Earths, may dwarf every human concern, but somehow it doesn't feel intimidating. It feels like a giant, glowing reminder that existence is vast and patient, and that you don't have to hurry through your own small orbit. You float a little higher now, watching the granules shift beneath you like golden petals in a breeze that doesn't exist. The surface undulates. The prominences loop. The magnetic fields twist. And all of it moves with the same calm, unstoppable energy that has been flowing since long before you were born. It's a dance without music, a rhythm without sound, a pulse without a heart. And still it goes on. You let the motion rock you gently the way a hammock rocks you on a warm afternoon. You don't need to understand every detail. You don't need every fact to line up in a perfect grid. You only need to feel the scale, the softness, the steady glow. The sun moves beneath you, and you drift above it, weightless, warm in spirit, carried forward by the quiet story of a star you've known all your life but never seen quite like this. You drift a little higher above the sun's shimmering, restless surface, letting the granules fade into a gentle blur beneath you. The motion becomes softer, slower, almost like the ocean smoothing itself after a long tide. You rest there for a moment, suspended in the warmth of your imagination, until another part of the sun reveals itself. It doesn't appear all at once. It creeps into awareness like thunder you feel before you hear a subtle shift in the atmosphere around you. You sense something brewing deep beneath the roiling texture, something bigger than the loops and arcs you've already seen. Solar storms, not storms with wind or rain, not the kind that rattle windows or sweep leaves down the street. These storms don't sound like anything. They don't roar or boom. They're silent, but their power is so intense that you can almost feel the fabric of space tense around them. You drift closer again, just enough that the motions on the surface sharpen into clarity. You see dark patches scattered across the molten gold, sunspots. They look like smudges, cool shadows on the blazing canvas, but they're enormous. The smallest ones could swallow Earth without chewing. The largest could fit multiple Earths side by side, like beads on a string. You hover above one now, watching it churn. The plasma around it twists and pulls like water circling a drain, except in every direction, because the magnetic fields here don't behave politely. They tangle like wires behind an entertainment center, except each wire is a magnetic loop powerful enough to drag plasma thousands of kilometers upward. You watch the tension build. It's the slowest kind of suspense, like holding your breath during a scene, even though nothing loud is happening yet. The magnetic field's knot tighter and tighter, twisting like a spring being wound. And then, without sound, without a shockwave, something snaps. A flare erupts upward in a bright, explosive blossom. It expands like a blooming flower made of pure light, petals curling outward in all directions. It looks slow in your imagination, graceful even, like a time lapse of sunrise. But in reality, these flares blast out with more energy than millions of nuclear bombs. The sun does this casually, like someone adjusting a blanket. And somehow that scale doesn't frighten you. It steadies you. Everything is allowed to be huge out here. Everything is allowed to take up space. As the flare curls upward, it sends a wave across the surface. Ripples of brightness expanding like circles from a stone dropped into a pond. And then, from deeper within the sunspot region, something even more dramatic unfurls. A coronal mass ejection. A CME. A giant bubble of plasma and magnetic field rising slowly, steadily, majestically, like a lantern lifting into the sky. You watch it swell, then detach, then drift outward into space with an almost tender grace. If it were aimed at Earth, it could rattle the planet's magnetic field, create auroras that paint the sky bright enough to write poetry under, and in rare, extreme cases, overwhelm electrical systems. The idea of a solar storm swallowing cities isn't poetic exaggeration. It's a reminder that our modern world relies on delicate threads of technology that a star, on a particularly restless day, could tug at. But even that doesn't make you uneasy. Here in this imagined vantage point, you feel protected, distant, weightless. The sun isn't angry. It isn't lashing out. Solar storms aren't temper tantrums. They're just byproducts of magnetic fields rearranging themselves, like knots in your shoulders finally releasing. A tiny, sleepy smile tugs at your thoughts. You imagine the sun stretching after a long cosmic nap and accidentally launching a flare big enough to make Earth reroute a few satellites. It's chaotic, but not malicious. If anything, it's relatable. You've probably stretched in the morning and knocked something off a shelf without meaning to. The sun just has a bigger reach. You drift closer to the CME as it floats away. Even though it's moving at millions of kilometers per hour, in your mind it's slow, like a bubble drifting on a breeze. The corona around the sun glows behind it, wispy, ghostly layers of plasma that extend millions of kilometers outward. The corona is so bright and so faint at the same time. It's hotter than the surface by a factor of hundreds, a paradox that scientists still debate with equal parts passion and confusion. Why should the outer layer be hotter than the layer beneath it? Where does that extra energy come from? Theories exist, but the definitive answer remains elusive. The sun, despite being studied for centuries, still keeps its crown a mystery. You float deeper into the corona, watching it ripple in long, elegant waves. The light becomes softer here, more diffused, like fog made of fire. You imagine holding your hand out and feeling the warmth, but your imagination protects you, turning the millions of degrees into something like a warm towel draped over your shoulders. The universe is kind to you in this dream state. It lets you explore without consequences. Below you, the sunspot cluster continues to evolve. More magnetic lines twist upward, some snapping, others stretching, some looping gracefully like neon arches. You feel the quiet intensity of it, the way energy builds and builds until it finally releases in a burst of brilliance. These storms are unpredictable, despite all the models, all the maps, all the monitoring. You can forecast them, estimate them, prepare for them, but you can't control them. And you shouldn't want to. They're part of the sun's personality, part of its breathing, part of its long, slow rhythm. A quirky thought rises, the kind that makes you exhale through your nose in a half laugh. If you try to stand on a sunspot, impossible, but imagine it would still be hotter than anything on Earth by orders of magnitude. Yet in sun terms, it's cool. A sunspot is so cool compared to the surrounding plasma that it looks dark by contrast. It's like putting a hot iron next to molten lava and calling the iron cold. That contrast tickles your brain in the gentlest way, as if the sun is constantly exaggerating its own brightness just to make a point. You watch the corona ripple again, shimmering like a curtain in a breeze you can't hear or feel. The CME drifts farther into space, thinning as it spreads out. If it were headed toward Earth, it might compress the magnetosphere, send particles swirling into polar regions, ignite auroras that ripple across the sky like green and purple curtains. You picture that for a moment, standing on a frozen lake somewhere near the Arctic Circle, wrapped in a coat, breath fogging the air, watching the sky dance because the sun sneezed 3 days earlier. Cosmic cause and effect. Start a sky, fire to color, and all of it silent. You let the quiet deepen inside you. The sun boils below you, magnetic fields twist around you, storms rise and fall, and yet your breath stays slow, your thoughts smooth. The scale of everything doesn't demand effort from you. It doesn't ask you to comprehend every number. It only asks you to drift, to witness, to let the enormity of the universe shrink your worries without shrinking you. And somewhere within this drifting calm, you feel the understanding bloom. Even the sun has storms. Even the most stable, glowing, powerful thing in your sky has moments of turmoil where energy builds unevenly, knots form, tension rises, and eventually something must release. The storms don't ruin the sun. They're part of what keeps it dynamic, alive, expressive. You don't criticize the sun for flaring. You don't judge it for ejecting plasma. You don't look at a sunspot and think, ugh, what a mess. You just accept it calmly as part of its nature. And slowly, quietly, you begin to feel a softness toward your own storms, toward the energy that builds inside you, toward the moments where emotion knots and heat rises and something needs to release. You watch the solar storm beneath you and understand, in a way that doesn't need words, that eruptions aren't flaws. They're cycles. They're natural. And like the sun, you shine steadily anyway. You drift just a little higher, letting the whole sun come back into view, a glowing sphere swirling with motion, storms, warmth, and rhythm. And you glide onward, deeper into the story, toward the next layer of scale waiting to unfold. You drift upward from the corona, letting the wispy tendrils of plasma fade like steam dissolving into a cool morning sky. The sun pulls back into a single golden sphere beneath you once more, calm from a distance, even though you know it's anything but calm up close. And as you rise a little farther, the next truth comes toward you slowly, like something massive rolling into view behind a curtain. The sun's weight. It's not a weight you can feel directly. Your imagination protects you from that. But an awareness of it begins to settle somewhere low in your body, warm and grounding. The sun holds almost all the mass of the entire solar system. Not half, not most, 99.8%. Everything else the planets, moons, asteroids, comets, little chunks of rock drifting in lonely orbits, all together make up the remaining crumbs. And Earth? Earth is one grain of sand in a system held almost entirely in place by a single star. You float with that thought for a moment, letting it stretch out like a slow exhale. It's easy to forget that mass is what creates gravity, and gravity is what creates orbits. And orbits are what make your world stable, predictable, survivable. The sun doesn't just shine, it holds everything. Every curve of Earth's path, every season, every tide, every rise and fall of temperature is tethered to the weight of the star below you. It's like the universe anchored your entire life to something you can't touch, but feel constantly. You imagine the sun's mass now not as a number, because the number is absurd, a 1 followed by 30 zeros, but as a kind of invisible pressure radiating outward in every direction. Not a crushing pressure, more like a gravitational embrace, a steady pull that keeps planets from wandering off into the cold, lonely dark. You've never truly felt weightlessness, but drifting here, suspended just above the star, you get a faint suggestion of what it means to exist without your own mass mattering. The sun's gravity does all the work. You merely float. A soft, unexpected realization sneaks in. If the sun were even a little lighter, Earth's orbit would change. If it were heavier, everything would tighten, speed up. Life might not exist at all. But here you are, in a universe where the star that birthed your world has exactly the mass it needs to hold everything together without pulling too hard or letting anything drift too far. That balance isn't luck so much as cosmic process, but to your sleepy mind it feels like a quiet miracle, a kind of Goldilocks of gravity. You drift a little closer, sensing the gravity deepening around you. It doesn't pull harshly. It's like sinking into warm water, feeling pressure grow gradually around your skin. The surface beneath you bulges ever so slightly in your vision, not enough to notice unless you know the truth. The sun isn't a perfect sphere. Its rotation makes it a tiny bit flattened at the poles and slightly wider at the equator. You picture it almost like a spinning water balloon, bulging where it spins fastest. Not by much, just enough that scientists measure it and then make long, thoughtful debates about exactly how much and why. You imagine those debates now, half amused. Researchers arguing lovingly over fractions of a percent, over micrometers of difference in a star that dwarfs Earth by orders of magnitude. It's a strangely warming thought. The universe is so big that humans argue about tiny details of enormous things because the enormous things themselves are too steady to fuss over. The sun doesn't seem to mind. It keeps turning, keeps glowing, keeps calling the shots through gravity without ever raising its voice. Your attention drifts deeper into that gravitational field. You can almost feel the curve of space itself bending downward around the sun, like a soft indentation on a mattress where a heavy body rests. That's the sun's true weight, not the mass itself, but the way it shapes everything around it. Space becomes a bowl. Planets become marbles rolling around the edges. And you, just floating here, see the bowl from above. You see the paths carved by the invisible pull. You see the orbits as elegant loops, not as constraints, but as choreography. The idea makes your chest loosen. Gravity is often talked about as a force, but here, in this dreamy road trip through the solar system, it feels more like guidance. Like a gentle hand placed on your shoulder, steering you through the dark without pressure. The planets don't fight their orbits. They follow them. And the sun doesn't demand obedience. It simply exists with such presence that everything responds naturally. A quirky detail rises from the depths of science, the kind of fact that wiggles into your thoughts with a little grin. If the sun suddenly vanished, don't worry, this is just cosmic imagination. You wouldn't feel the loss of gravity immediately, any more than you'd stop seeing sunlight immediately. Just like light, gravity also travels at the speed of light. So for about 8 minutes, Earth would keep orbiting as though nothing had changed. A ghost orbit. Then the shift would arrive all at once. It's an eerie idea, but here in this calm dream space, it feels more poetic than unsettling. Like an invisible goodbye arriving fashionably late. You let yourself float there in the gravitational bowl, noticing how the sun seems to glow from within rather than radiate outward. It's not throwing light at you. It's just so full of energy that light spills from it constantly. And the weight that holds everything together isn't heavy in the emotional sense. It's steady, comforting, reliable. The sun doesn't rush. It doesn't change quickly. It exists on timescales, so long your mind relaxes just trying to comprehend them. There's an open question scientists still wrestle with, one that drifts into your thoughts now with the softness of a feather landing on your palm. How exactly does the sun's weight shift over time? We know it loses mass as it shines. Fusion literally converts matter into energy. Every second, it loses millions of tons of mass. That sounds dramatic until you remember how enormous it is. The loss is microscopic in comparison. But over billions of years, those tiny losses add up. Does that gradually lighten gravity's pull? Does it subtly expand Earth's orbit? How much? How fast? The debate is ongoing, and the uncertainty feels oddly comforting. Even the most predictable star in your sky has subtleties we're still learning to measure. You drift back into the broader view. The sun turns slowly beneath you, a massive golden heart pumping gravity instead of blood, holding an entire family of planets together. You picture Earth somewhere behind you, a little marble caught in its curved path, circling again and again like a dancer returning to the same step with perfect trust in the rhythm. And the trust is deserved. The sun has been doing this for 4.6 billion years and will keep doing it for billions more. Its weight doesn't waver. Its gravity doesn't forget you exist. Even when you're asleep, even when you're overwhelmed, even when you're lost in your thoughts at 3 a.m. The sun keeps everything moving smoothly without asking anything of you. A soft feeling settles into your ribs, a sense of being held, not by the sun itself, but by the idea of stability on that scale. Your worries shrink a little, not in a dismissive way, but in a balanced way. The universe is vast and heavy and steady, and you are part of it, not fighting against it. You drift there for a long moment, letting the sun's weight, its cosmic gravity, anchor you in the calmest possible way. And slowly, gently, you turn your attention toward the next part of the journey waiting ahead, just beyond the curve of the star. You drift a little farther from the star, just enough that the full sphere settles back into view, glowing, rotating, breathing in a way that makes you feel like you're watching something alive. Not alive in the human sense, not with thoughts or moods or intentions, but alive in rhythm, alive in repetition, alive in the way oceans have tides and forests have seasons, and your own body has a heartbeat that rises and falls without needing your permission. The sun has a pulse too, a cycle, a long, slow inhale and exhale stretched across years. You hover quietly, letting that idea settle until you begin to notice it. Subtle at first, like the faintest vibration beneath your feet. Not literal vibration. Your imagination has stripped away danger, but a sense of motion happening deeper than the surface. Something moving beneath the golden granules, beneath the convection zone, beneath everything you've floated through so far. A pulse that stretches across 11 years. The solar cycle. It's one of those things you've heard about in passing. Sunspot numbers rising, solar maximum, solar minimum. But from here, in this drifting, dreamlike vantage point, it feels different. More intimate, more rhythmic. You can almost sense the cycle unfolding like a breath drawn over a decade, held for a moment, and then released just as slowly. You float closer again, gliding toward a patch of surface where small, scattered sunspots begin to pepper the plasma like freckles. These are early cycle spots, few in number, quiet, almost shy. They cluster closer to the poles at first, like dancers waiting for their cue. And as the years pass in your imagination, the spots multiply. They drift toward the equator, spreading and darkening, their magnetic fields tangling and snapping like ribbons caught in a breeze. The sun's activity rises. Flares become more frequent. Prominences stretch larger. The whole star hums with a kind of magnetic electricity, even though space stays silent. This is solar maximum, the crest of the sun's long inhale. You see the difference now. not because the sun's light becomes brighter, but because its surface becomes more expressive, more chaotic, more dramatically textured. The star becomes a painter working feverishly across its own skin. And yet you don't feel tension watching it. You feel the same softness you would watching ocean waves grow taller for a while before settling again. Another quirky detail drifts into your mind, warm as a small ember. During solar maximum, the sun's magnetic poles flip. North becomes south. South becomes north. The entire magnetic field inverts like a cosmic etch-a-sketch being shaken. And it happens so smoothly, so silently, that if you lived your whole life staring at the sky without instruments, you'd never know the sun had casually reversed itself. Meanwhile, Earth sits quietly in its orbit, adjusting to the shifting solar wind as the heliosphere, the bubble around the solar system, reorganizes. Scientists debate parts of this too. The internal solar dynamo that drives these flips is still not fully understood. Models explain pieces, but not all. The deep flows of plasma that churn beneath the surface, the subtle patterns that cause magnetic lines to twist and align, these remain partly mysterious. And that uncertainty doesn't feel threatening. It feels like permission to breathe. Even stars can have habits we haven't figured out yet. You drift with that thought as the solar cycle continues unfolding below you. Years pass in moments. The stormy maximum slowly fades. Sunspots become fewer. Magnetic tangles loosen. Flares quiet down. The sun moves into its long exhale, solar minimum. The surface looks smoother from your vantage point, calmer, like a lake settling after a storm. And even though the star is always boiling, always moving, you can feel the difference in energy. It's quieter, sleepier, content to glow steadily without demanding attention. Somewhere between these extremes, between quiet minimum and wild maximum, the sun's heartbeat finds its rhythm. And you can almost hear it, if hearing weren't impossible out here. Not sound exactly, but pattern. A rise and fall reminiscent of your own breath when you're about to fall asleep. The cycle stretches across 11 years on average, though sometimes the sun stretches it longer, sometimes shorter, and researchers still puzzle over why. It's one of those gentle scientific debates where the universe seems to smile and say, "Keep going. You're close." You hover in the quiet of minimum now, feeling your own breath deepen subconsciously, as though your body is sinking to the sun's slow exhale. With the storms fading, the surface looks more like the simmering sea you saw earlier, granules rising and sinking, convection cells reshaping themselves in endless patterns. You drift just above them again, and the scale feels more manageable now. The star isn't roaring. It's humming, a soft hum, like the whir of a fan in a quiet bedroom. Familiar, comforting. You can almost imagine the sun speaking in that half-sarcastic, half-sleepy tone your mind uses sometimes. Look, I'm still a giant ball of plasma doing nuclear fusion nonstop, but even I need a mellow phase. And the idea makes you exhale a tiny, sleepy laugh. It fits. Everything in nature cycles. Everything rests between bursts of intensity. Even the most powerful star in your sky takes time to soften. A quirky thought lands next. Light as a floating leaf. During solar minimum, cosmic rays from outside the solar system reach Earth more easily because the sun's magnetic field isn't as puffed up and deflective. It's as if the sun lowers its shield a little, letting more of the universe sneak through. Those particles don't harm you. They're just part of the constant cosmic drizzle falling through space. But the idea that you live under an ever-changing umbrella woven from magnetic fields adds another layer of softness to your imagining. Even your protection has a rhythm. You drift into another perspective shift now. Not upward or downward, but outward. You picture the whole solar system glowing faintly in the sun's magnetic bubble. You imagine the planets moving like marbles on a slow-moving carousel, each one riding an orbit shaped not just by gravity, but by the continuous breath of the star. The solar wind flows outward, shaping the tails of comets, sweeping dust, interacting with planetary atmospheres, whispering through space in a stream of charged particles. You follow it with your mind, tracing it past Mars, past Jupiter, past the frozen edges where the sun's influence eventually fades into the interstellar medium. Then you drift back toward the star, drawn by its pulse again. 11 years. Rise and fall. Quiet to chaos, chaos to quiet. You imagine your own life mapped across those cycles. The seasons you've lived through, the years that felt stormy, the years that felt calmer, the years where everything flipped on its head before settling into a new normal. You see the parallel, soft but unmistakable. The sun doesn't panic when its magnetic poles reverse. It doesn't fear its storms. It doesn't try to freeze itself at maximum or minimum. It cycles, naturally, inevitably, gently, and you feel something settle inside you, something like an emotional version of gravity pulling your thoughts into alignment. You don't have to be constant. You don't have to be endlessly productive. You don't have to glow at maximum brightness all the time. You're allowed to have cycles, to have quieter seasons, to rebuild between storms. You hover a little higher now, back at the vantage point where the entire sphere is visible. You see faint hints of the cycle layered across the surface. The poles hinting at another flip someday. The sunspots preparing to return. The golden glow soft and steady. And in the quiet, you realize something gentle and grounding. The sun's constancy doesn't come from being unchanging. It comes from being reliable in its rhythms. You breathe with that rhythm now, slow and steady, as if syncing yourself to something ancient and patient and vast. The sun pulses, and you drift into its calm. You drift above the sun long enough to settle fully into its rhythm, feeling that slow 11-year pulse fade into the background like a soft drumbeat you no longer consciously hear. But now, another realization rises around you, one that reshapes the star in ways you didn't expect. It begins as a faint sensation, the feeling that the giant sphere beneath you isn't where you left it, as if, during one of your long, dreamy blinks, the sun shifted a little in space. Not dramatically, not like a leap, more like a giant turning in its sleep. Because the sun doesn't stay still. Not for a moment. It moves. You feel the truth of it spreading slowly around you, wrapping you like a warm shawl. You've always pictured the sun as the anchor, the center, the motionless point that everything else orbits like obedient children around a patient parent. And in a way, that's still true for the planets. But the sun isn't the unmoving center of the galaxy. It's a traveler, wandering through space at unimaginable speeds. A cosmic passenger on the Milky Way's spiraling highway. You drift a little farther out, just enough that you can see a small arc of the star's path, a subtle curve carved through the dark. The sun is moving around the center of the galaxy at roughly 220 kilometers per second. Not per hour, per second. Every time you blink, the sun has traveled hundreds of kilometers forward. It's racing through space like a quiet runner who doesn't breathe hard, doesn't make sound, doesn't boast. It simply moves, and you move with it. Because everything on Earth, your home, your body, your heartbeat, your memories, rides along in that same motion. You're never still, not even when you're asleep. Not even in this moment where your breathing has slowed and your thoughts have softened. Beneath your calm exterior, you're flying through space at speeds that would melt any aircraft humanity has ever built. And yet it feels gentle. It feels soft. It feels safe. That's the strange, comforting paradox. Motion on this scale becomes stillness. You float a little farther from the star, watching its path stretch across the galaxy like a luminous thread. It's not a straight line, of course. Nothing in space moves in a straight line when gravity is involved. Instead, the sun orbits the galactic center like a bead sliding along a giant spiral track, completing one orbit every 230 million years. One galactic year. The Earth has orbited the sun billions of times, but the whole solar system has completed only about 20 galactic years since it formed. That realization lands softly in you, like dust settling on a windowsill. Your entire species, every story, every civilization, every whisper of history exists inside a tiny fraction of a single galactic year. You haven't even made it a quarter around the galaxy since dinosaurs walked the Earth. You're living through a blink of galactic time, and somehow, that doesn't make you feel small. It makes everything feel more precious, like your little sliver of movement is part of a much longer, much wider, much deeper journey. You drift at the sun's side now, riding shotgun as it moves through the interstellar medium. You imagine the solar wind reaching ahead like a bow wave, shaping the heliosphere, the protective bubble around the solar system. It's not a perfect sphere. It's more like a comet tail, stretched behind the moving star as it pushes through the thin gas and dust of the galaxy. The sun's motion carves a shape in space, sculpting invisible boundaries that trail for billions of kilometers. The heliosphere becomes like a giant cocoon, shielding Earth from cosmic radiation, filtering out some of the harshest particles the galaxy throws in your direction. You drift along its edge in your imagination, where the solar wind slows, where interstellar material brushes against the boundary like fingers trailing across taut fabric. This region, the heliopause, is where the sun's authority ends and the galaxy's influence begins. Voyager 1 crossed it years ago, silently slipping into interstellar space while still whispering back faint signals. That fact drifts through your thoughts like a tiny lantern floating through the dark. A machine built by human hands made it out here. Not to the sun, not to another star, but to the edge of our star's domain. A small reminder that even in a universe so large, tiny things can travel far. You let that settle before drifting back toward the sun's bright presence. As you move, you begin to notice something gentle but peculiar. The sun doesn't travel alone. It wobbles. Not dramatically, not wildly, but just a little, a subtle, graceful sway caused by the gravitational pull of its planets. Most stars wobble. Every time a planet orbits, the star shifts slightly in response, like dance partners adjusting to each other's weight. You picture it now, the sun carrying on with its journey, but with a tiny side-to-side sway because Jupiter, massive, distant, slow, tugs on it. Jupiter doesn't orbit the sun's center. They orbit a shared center of mass slightly outside the sun's surface. The whole solar system is a dance, not a domination. And that dance results in a wobble so gentle you wouldn't notice it unless you were watching from afar with extremely sensitive instruments. The thought makes you smile because it turns the sun from a stationary boss into a surprisingly cooperative dance partner. It shifts a little, leans a little, accommodates the gravitational pull of its companions. It moves in relationship. It responds, and it keeps doing so for billions of years without complaint. A quirky thought drifts up, the kind that makes your inner voice chuckle. If you could see the sun's path through the galaxy over millions of years, it wouldn't be a smooth arc. It would be a squiggly line, looping and spiraling like someone trying to walk straight after stepping off a merry-go-round. The sun's wobble, combined with its galactic orbit, creates a path that looks almost playful, like a child dragging a sparkler through the night air. That image softens something inside you, the way a warm memory softens your breathing. A star, with all its power and weight, tracing a whimsical, glowing squiggle through the galaxy. And you, right now, drifting beside it like a curious passenger admiring the view. Another layer of motion reveals itself, then, a vertical bobbing through the galactic plane. The sun doesn't stay at one height within the Milky Way's disk. It moves up and down as it orbits, like a boat rising and falling with ocean swells. Every 30-some million years, it crosses the galactic midline. Scientists still debate how significant this bobbing is. Does it affect comets? The climate? Evolution? The data is suggestive, but not conclusive. An open question floating steadily through astrophysics like an unfinished sentence. You hover in that vertical motion now, feeling the sun drift ever so slightly upward, then downward, then upward again. A rhythm layered on a rhythm, layered on a rhythm. Cycles within cycles. Motion within motion. Everything moving in gentle complexity that feels soothing rather than chaotic. And then, without warning, the most comforting realization of the entire journey settles over you. The sun's motion is not frantic. It's not rushed. It's not stressed. It doesn't sprint its orbit. It glides, gracefully, patiently, smoothly. Even at 220 kilometers per second, the motion feels calm from your perspective because everything around you is moving with it. You're inside the motion, born into it, carried by it every day of your life. You've never once felt the galaxy rushing by, and you never will. The sun is your ship. The solar system is your cabin. Space is the ocean you cross in your sleep. And knowing that something eases inside you, a tension you didn't realize you were holding. You're part of a journey you don't have to navigate. You're already moving farther than any traveler could dream, simply by existing. The sun keeps gliding, and you glide with it. Stars drift past like distant lanterns. The galaxy curves slowly beneath you like a spiral carved into velvet. The motion feels endless, steady, deeply peaceful. And as you float beside the sun, aware now of its wobble, its orbit, its bobbing, its journey through the galaxy's vast ocean of darkness, you understand something simple and soothing. Nothing in the universe stays still. Not stars, not planets, not you. But movement doesn't demand anxiety. Sometimes movement is just another kind of stillness stretched across a larger scale. You breathe in, you drift, you follow the sun's pulse, and the journey carries you forward. You stay beside the sun as it glides through the galaxy, floating in that gentle silence where motion feels like stillness. But as you drift just a little closer again, something faint brushes against you. So faint you almost mistake it for your own imagination exhaling. It's not warmth, not light, not sound. It's motion, but on a scale so delicate you barely feel it. The solar wind. It's easy to think of wind as something loud, something that pushes hair back and rattles windows, something with a voice. But the solar wind is different. It's a stream of charged particles leaving the sun continuously, flowing outward in every direction, soft as dust drifting through a sunbeam. There's no rushing sound, no pressure, nothing dramatic. Just a quiet stream of energy, steady and tireless, stretching across billions of kilometers until it fades into the interstellar dark. You let yourself slip into that stream now, letting it guide you outward like a slow current. It doesn't shove you. It carries you, gentle as a warm tide. This is the same wind that shapes comet tails, the same wind that protects Earth by inflating the heliosphere, the same wind that dances with Earth's magnetic field to create the auroras. It's everywhere and always has been, and you've lived your entire life in its wake without ever feeling it. You drift along with it now, noticing how the wind changes as it flows. There are fast streams and slow ones, like lanes in a cosmic river. The sun's poles release the fast wind, swift, clean, consistent, while the equatorial regions send out the slower, more tangled wind. You float through both, feeling the difference. The fast wind is smooth. The slow wind is a little bumpy, like swirling currents around a rock. But nothing here is threatening. Everything is soft. Everything is slow enough for your thoughts to relax into the flow. Somewhere behind you, the sun begins to shrink slightly as the wind carries you farther. It's still massive in your vision, still radiating golden light, but now you see the streams more clearly. They don't glow. They don't sparkle. They're invisible unless you imagine them as faint ribbons rising off the surface. You picture them like that, like feathers drifting upward, and the image fits surprisingly well. A quirky fact surfaces naturally. The solar wind actually makes a faint sound, If translated into audio by scientists, a low, ghostly humming created by the changing magnetic fields. You can't hear it here. Space stays silent. But imagining that hum, a deep and distant vibration, makes the moment feel even more otherworldly. Like the universe has a background music track you've never noticed until now. You continue riding the solar wind, drifting farther from the star until you begin to sense the way it interacts with the planets. You see Earth now, small and blue, surrounded by its magnetic field like a protective bubble. When the solar wind hits that bubble, most of it slides around the planet. But some particles spiral down the magnetic poles, colliding with atmospheric molecules that glow in response. Auroras, curtains of green, pink, violet, and blue waving softly in the polar night. You hover above Earth now, just above the auroral oval, watching curtains of light sway across the sky like silk scarves caught in a breeze. They're soft, hypnotic. They shimmer like they're breathing. And somewhere inside you, your own breathing matches their rhythm. Slow, calm, deep. It's easy to forget how connected all of this is, that the solar wind you're drifting in is the same wind that paints the night sky in color, the same wind that shapes the boundary of the solar system, the same wind that gently pushes on dust and comets and spacecraft. Even now, you feel it guiding you back outward again, pulling you away from Earth and back into the wider current. You drift until the blue marble fades behind you, letting the solar wind carry you past Mars, past the asteroid belt, past Jupiter's swirling storms and Saturn's translucent rings. The wind thins as you travel. It becomes softer, more subtle, like breath fading as someone falls asleep. But it's still there, stretching outward until it reaches the termination shock, the boundary where the solar wind slows dramatically as it encounters the interstellar medium. You feel that boundary now, not as a wall, but as a soft change in pressure. The wind becomes gentler, like a whisper turning into a sigh. Beyond this point lies the heliosphere, a region where the wind mixes with the thin gas between the stars. It feels cool, quiet, and vast in a way that's hard to describe. You drift through it, letting the sense of scale expand inside you like a long stretch after waking from a nap. Scientists still debate the exact shape of the heliosphere. For decades, they pictured it like a comet tail trailing behind the sun. Now, some models suggest it might be bubble-shaped or croissant-shaped. Yes, croissant, a cosmic pastry of magnetic fields and solar wind. And the idea makes you smile, because even in the scale of billions of kilometers, the universe still serves up shapes that feel warm and familiar, like something you might have eaten for breakfast. You coast toward the heliopause, the true edge of the sun's influence. Here, the solar wind finally stops. Completely. It's the boundary between solar territory and the rest of the galaxy. You float right at that edge now, where Voyager 1 passed. It feels like a doorway. Quiet. Serene. A moment of stillness before stepping into a different kind of silence. You stay there a long moment, breathing with the hush of space, feeling both the presence of the sun behind you and the vastness of the galaxy ahead. The boundary isn't frightening. It's peaceful, like standing at the edge of a calm lake, watching ripples fade into glass. The solar wind fades here, but your awareness doesn't. You feel something gentle, grounding. You've been carried this entire way by a star you've never felt directly. The sun has been pushing on you your entire life. Not hard, not urgently, but continuously. A steady exhale guiding you through existence. You never noticed until now, but you've always been in motion because of it. You turn back toward the sun, watching its warm glow from the very edge of its domain. And a small realization settles in you, like a feather landing in your palm. Even the gentlest forces shape your life more than you realize. Even the quietest currents move you. Even the softest energy can carry you farther than you ever expected. You begin drifting back toward the star now, letting the solar wind reverse in your imagination so it can guide you home. The sun grows brighter as you return, steady and warm and familiar. And you follow it, breathing deeply, riding the soft current all the way back into the golden glow. You ease back toward the golden sphere as the remnants of the solar wind's gentle push fade behind you. And now the star feels steady again, warm in its slow cosmic glide. But something shifts in your awareness. You start noticing not just the sun's path through the galaxy, but the neighborhood it moves through. A neighborhood that isn't empty at all. A neighborhood full of drifting gas, sparse dust, old star remnants, magnetic knots, and long-forgotten clouds stretched so thin you could pass through them without ever knowing. And the sun, with you drifting patiently beside it, is traveling right through this constantly shifting environment. The local interstellar cloud. It sounds dramatic, like a glowing nebula swirling with electric blue fog, but really it's more subtle. So subtle you could float in it without feeling anything at all. It's a faint, airy ghost of hydrogen atoms and dust that the sun entered tens of thousands of years ago, long before humans figured out fire. You slip into the imagining of that cloud now, letting its quiet density brush against your skin in the same delicate way morning fog slides across your face. It's thin, far thinner than Earth's best vacuum chambers, but somehow knowing the sun is passing through something gives the space around you texture. You picture the sun carving its way through this cloud, pushing outward with the heliosphere, its solar wind acting like a shield that keeps interstellar particles from flooding the inner solar system. The heliosphere is basically the sun's bubble of influence, a kind of slowly flexing protective cocoon. And the star's movement through the galaxy changes the shape of that bubble over time. You notice the way it ripples around the edges, responding to the density of the cloud like a membrane reacting to gentle pressure. A quirky little thought drifts in. In a few thousand years, the sun will drift into a slightly different interstellar region. These clouds aren't stationary. They're slow-moving rivers of gas, and the sun is just passing through. Astronomers still debate exactly how dense the next cloud is. Some say it's thicker, some say thinner. Some suggest we're entering a layered region where the density shifts like soft waves. The uncertainty feels calming rather than concerning. Everything the sun has ever passed through, Earth has survived. And you're riding along that same path, wrapped in the same protection. You drift farther from the sun's side again, letting the galactic backdrop take over your senses. Stars shimmer like distant sparks, and the Milky Way forms a luminous river across the dark. You realize something comforting. The sun is not drifting randomly. It follows the ordered curvature of the galaxy's gravity, moving through spiral arms, slipping between them, passing through regions of higher and lower star density over millions of years. Right now, the sun is in what astronomers call the local bubble, a huge, carved-out cavity in the interstellar medium created long ago by multiple supernova explosions. You imagine those supernovae like ancient fireworks, long faded, but their shock waves left behind this vast pocket of thinner gas. The sun, your home star, is gliding through the aftermath of stellar deaths that happened before humanity existed, and the idea settles into you gently, like a memory from before your birth. Stars die, stars are born, and stars travel through the spaces shaped by those events. It's all part of a continuous, soft rhythm. You drift upward now, imagining looking down on the local bubble from above. It's not perfectly round. It's irregular, like a soap bubble frozen mid-tremble. Edges flaring here and there. Cavities leading into other cavities. And the sun sits inside one of its corridors, sailing through on its long trip around the galaxy. Earth feels so still beneath your feet most days, yet in reality you're inside a star system moving through a balloon of interstellar quiet carved out by ancient detonations. Somehow that doesn't feel scary. It feels like you're inside a cosmic lullaby. As you hover there, another detail rises and takes shape in your imagination. The stars around you aren't fixed either. They have their own motions, their own paths, their own slow drift. The sun is part of a moving crowd, a star stream, a kind of stellar neighborhood where the distances are unimaginably vast, but everyone is still on the highway together. Every star moves. Every star has a path, and the sun's is just one line among billions. You picture nearby stars now. Alpha Centauri glowing faintly, Barnard Star rushing along at one of the fastest speeds in the local region, Sirius shining with that crisp, bluish-white brightness. Each of them has its own route, its own velocity, its own unique wobble. And every few tens of thousands of years, the lineup changes. Stars drift closer or farther. Constellations morph. New patterns appear in the sky. You're living inside a moving mosaic, even if from Earth it looks perfectly stable to the naked eye. Another soft thought floats up. In about 1.3 million years, the star Gliese 710 will pass close enough to nudge the Oort cloud, sending comets drifting inward like long-lost messengers. A few might reach the inner solar system. It sounds dramatic, but here in this dreamy state, it feels more like a reminder that the universe doesn't do stillness. Everything moves. Everything brushes past everything else, eventually. You picture the Oort cloud now, a spherical haze of icy debris surrounding the entire solar system at distances so large they're almost impossible to picture. The sun's motion through the galaxy, its dip through the galactic plane, its encounters with interstellar clouds. These all send tiny ripples through that cloud, occasionally nudging comets inward over millions of years. It's like brushing your hand across tall grass. Some strands bend, some don't, some bounce back slowly. The Oort cloud reacts the same way. You drift through that cloud in your imagination, feeling nothing but a sense of ancient cold. Most of the objects here are tiny, dark, asleep. They've been frozen since the dawn of the solar system, waiting for chance encounters to send them sunward. You float past them without touching anything, like drifting through a field of old memories. And as the sun moves through the galaxy, these memories shift slightly, gently stirred by the star's passage. You let yourself settle into the movement again, the stars sailing through the local bubble, drifting through wisps of interstellar gas, gliding between clusters. You feel how steady the motion is, how unhurried, how patient. The sun has been doing this for billions of years, and it will keep doing it long after your species is gone. That's not a sad thought. It's grounding. It's a reminder that you're riding shotgun with a star that's older than every human story combined. A quirky scientific tidbit slips into your mind like a small friend joining you. Occasionally, as the sun moves, it passes through denser regions of dust that slightly redden its light. Not enough for your eyes to notice, but enough for sensitive instruments to pick up. It's like the star takes a stroll through a fog bank and comes out with a faint tint. Scientists debate how often this happens, or how noticeable the effects are. Some say it could subtly cool Earth. Some say the effect is negligible. Some shrug and say the data isn't clear yet. And the uncertainty gives everything a soft, mysterious glow. You drift closer to the sun again, watching it light up the faint traces of dust around it. It's impossible not to feel comfort in the star's companionship. You're part of its journey, whether you think about it or not. The whole solar system is one family of objects traveling together through the galaxy, riding the same gravitational wave, sharing the same slow-motion adventure. And as you float beside the star, letting its gentle motion carry you onward, you understand something warm and simple. You're moving through the universe even when you feel stuck. Even when life feels still or heavy or unmoving, the cosmos is carrying you forward. The sun is leading you through the galaxy without asking anything of you. You're already in motion, already part of a grand, soft drift through infinite space. You breathe with that realization, letting it settle deep into your chest. The sun glides on, and you glide with it, without effort, without worry, carried by a star that has never once stopped moving. You drift beside the sun for a long, unhurried moment, letting the scale of everything you've just seen settle into the soft folds of your mind. And then, almost without effort, your perspective begins to shift again. The vastness fades. The distances soften. The dizzying scale of the galaxy melts into something closer, smaller, more familiar. Because now you're going to do something your brain secretly loves. Shrink the universe until you can hold it. Make it small enough to touch. Make the incomprehensible simple, almost playful. You start with the sun itself. The massive, luminous sphere beneath you begins to contract. Not violently, not fast, but gently, like a balloon losing air in a warm room. It shrinks until it's the size of a big exercise ball. Smooth, warm, glowing faintly with a soft golden hue. Something you could rest your hands on without burning. Something familiar. Something safe. Earth shrinks with it, becoming a tiny bead. A peppercorn. A bright blue that you could roll between your fingers if you weren't so worried about dropping something that contains everything and everyone you love. Mars becomes a little red seed. Jupiter, a tangerine. Saturn, a lemon with a delicate paper-thin ring around it. The distances shrink too. The space between the sun and Earth becomes a few dozen meters, far enough to walk, close enough to see in a single glance. You stand in your imagination now, feet on some soft cosmic floor, holding the entire solar system in a space the size of a park. Suddenly, everything feels understandable, manageable. The sun no longer looks like a god. It looks like something your hands could touch, but wouldn't dare squeeze. You walk toward it slowly, feeling that quiet, oh, now it makes sense sensation spreading from your chest to your shoulders. This scaled-down solar system changes something deep in your brain. It lets you see the truth without drowning in it. You can finally feel just how small Earth really is, how far it sits from the sun, even when the distance is scaled down, and how peaceful all of it becomes once the numbers turn into shapes and objects you can hold. A quirky realization pops in. If the sun were a basketball, Earth would still be smaller than a mustard seed. You picture that seed rolling across your palm. Something that tiny contains oceans, forests, mountains, cities, billions of humans, every story ever told. Your whole existence reduced to something you could lose under your couch. And somehow that's strangely comforting. It makes anxiety feel like a temporary visitor rather than a ruler. You kneel beside the mustard seed, Earth now, watching it float at the perfect distance from the basketball sun. Perfect for liquid water. Perfect for weather. Perfect for life. You don't need to repeat the Goldilocks zone idea. You simply feel it in your bones, the way a small space heater warms you from just the right distance. Too close, and you'd sweat. Too far, and you'd shiver. Earth sits in the sweet spot, and you can see that sweetness with your own eyes. You stand again, walking around the basketball sun, noticing something you didn't expect. The orbits are mostly empty. You always imagine space being crowded, full of planets bumping into each other. But in this scaled version, everything is so far apart that it feels like a giant minimalist art gallery. One piece over here. One piece way over there. Everything's spaced with intentional quiet. You wander past Mars, past Jupiter, feeling the size difference. Jupiter, even scaled down, looks like it wants to take up more room than the model suggests, like it's bursting with personality. You imagine it sighing dramatically in the background, which fits perfectly. Saturn, always stylish, shows off its thin ring with the self-satisfaction of someone wearing a new outfit they know looks good. You keep walking until the sunlight fades, and the outer planets begin to feel like forgotten marbles in a dusty attic. Uranus and Neptune barely glow. Pluto becomes a grain of cold sugar. The Kuiper Belt becomes confetti. And the Oort cloud, your last frontier, spreads out for miles in this scaled-down version, a ghostly halo of invisible ice you can't even see because the pieces are smaller than dust. You pause then, realizing something soft and enormous. In the real solar system, most of the space is just space. Wide, empty, quiet. The planets, even the big ones, are tiny ornaments hanging from the sun's gravitational tree. And Earth, your home, is one bead on a thread of space, so long it stretches beyond your imagination's reach. Another quirky thought surfaces. The Voyager spacecraft, traveling at incredible speeds for decades, would barely have made it halfway through your downsized model if you laid it out across a country. And that's not because Voyager is slow, but because the solar system is so unbelievably vast. Scientists still debate the precise distance where the solar system truly ends. Is it the heliopause? The Oort cloud? Some gravitational threshold far beyond that? The boundary remains an open question, which makes everything feel even more magical. You pick up the basketball sun now, just for a moment, feeling its warmth as an imagined glow against your palm. Not hot, not burning, just warm, like a stone heated by a full day of summer light. Holding it gives you a strange sense of authority, not power, but understanding, as though the universe whispered, "Here, this is what it really looks like when you reduce the impossible to something human." You turn the sun slowly in your hands, feeling its smooth surface, imagining the churning layers beneath. The fusion, the convection, the magnetic storms, the constant storms hidden under this perfectly calm exterior in your model. It feels like holding the calm face of someone who carries far more weight than they show. You set the sun back down gently and look out across your scaled-down solar system one more time. Everything feels quiet, soft, balanced, and in that moment, a subtle realization settles over you. Smallness isn't something to fear. It's something to appreciate. Your tiny size doesn't diminish your significance. It lets you fit into a universe this vast without being crushed by it. You take one last slow walk from Neptune back toward the warm glow of the basketball sun. And as you do, you feel the scale melting away again. The sun grows as you approach. The planets drift back to their true orbits. The distances stretch, elongate, deepen. Your footsteps fade. The model dissolves. And you're back in the true cosmic expanse, floating alongside the star that once fit in your hands. The transition is smooth, like sliding from a dream into another dream. And as the solar system returns to its unimaginable size, you feel a soft calm settle into your chest. You have seen the universe small. You have held the sun. You have understood it in a way that feels real, not abstract. And the understanding stays with you, even as the distances expand again. You float beside the sun once more, your familiar companion now, ready for the final stretch of the journey. You float beside the sun again, the model dissolving fully behind your mind's eye, leaving only the real star, vast, molten, quietly ancient. It's strange how familiar it feels now, like returning to a giant you've been walking beside for a very long time. You've touched its gravity, drifted through its storms, followed its pulse, traveled through the heliosphere, ridden the solar wind, and watched it glide through the galaxy like a lantern drifting down a cosmic river. And now, here you are, face to face with the last truth you've been circling around this entire journey. You are small, not in a dismissive, belittling way, not a lonely way, but in a clear, steady, deeply human way. The kind of smallness that takes weight off your shoulders instead of adding to it. The kind that makes you breathe easier. The kind that reminds you that you don't have to hold the universe together because something else already does. You float closer to the sun's surface, close enough to feel the warmth without any risk of pain, because this entire journey has been designed to hold you gently. The granules boil beneath you, forming and fading like bright honeycomb bubbles. Each cell is about the size of Texas, but from your vantage point, they look soft, like warm foam shifting in slow motion. The patterns tug at your attention, but not urgently. Nothing here demands urgency. Everything asks you to slow down. The sun keeps doing what it has always done. Burn quietly, hold everything in place, and shine. And even though it is a giant compared to you, it doesn't feel intimidating. It feels steady. It feels like a lighthouse that has been shining long before you were born and will continue long after you're gone. That constancy doesn't diminish your life. It gives it context. You drift back just a little, taking in the full sphere again. The star glows softly in your mind's warmth-adjusted perception, not blinding, not overwhelming, just a warm presence. And you feel something loosen in your chest, the way you might loosen your shoulders after carrying a heavy bag for too long without realizing it. Yes, you are small, but you're also held. Scientists sometimes argue, gently and endlessly, about whether the sun is an average star. Some say yes, some say no, some shrug, and say it depends on which properties you're comparing. That debate drifts through your awareness like the softest breeze. Because whether the sun is average or not, to you, it is extraordinary. And that's enough. You float a little farther, drifting into the comforting darkness where the sun becomes a warm ember hanging in a cold, infinite room. The contrast feels beautiful. The darkness isn't threatening. It's velvet, soft, quiet. The kind of quiet that lets your thoughts unclench. The kind of quiet where the only thing you feel is a slow relaxation creeping into your limbs. You picture Earth now, far behind you, a tiny, glowing bead. A world thin-skinned and fragile, but full of life and stories, and people who laugh, cry, dream, worry, love, argue, hug, and hope. All on a planet the size of a mustard seed in your earlier model. A place so small the sun could swallow 1,000,000 copies of it and still have room left over. A place that somehow supports consciousness, emotion, creativity, confusion, joy, and the urge to look up at the sky and whisper, "What's out there?" That curiosity is one of the reasons you're here right now, drifting beside this star. The desire to understand. The desire to place yourself in something larger. The desire to know how small you really are in a universe where distances stretch beyond imagination. That desire isn't weakness. It's the most human thing about you. Another quirky thought pops into your mind. Some stars are so dense that a teaspoon of their material would weigh more than a mountain. You picture holding that spoon and immediately drop the idea because your wrist would snap like a cracker. But the thought makes you smile because even though the universe contains impossibilities like that, it also contains you. A soft, breathing creature who can't lift a neutron star, but can understand it, can imagine it, can describe it. And that's its own kind of power. You turn back to the sun, just letting yourself drift with it for a while. No need to rush. The star moves through the galaxy at its own unhurried pace, and you move with it, letting the cosmic road stretch out in front of you like a path made of soft starlight. You feel the motion now, not as speed, but as inevitability. Everything moves, everything changes, everything shifts, and yet the universe remains steady in its rhythms. You let that sink into your bones, the soft reminder that you don't have to fight the motion of life. You're allowed to drift with it, allowed to let the universe carry you instead of trying to carry everything yourself. You're allowed to be small. You're allowed to rest. You look at the sun one more time, noticing how the glow spreads through the dark like a warm whisper. It doesn't shout its importance. It doesn't flex its power. It simply shines. And you realize that being small in the face of something so vast doesn't erase your significance. It clarifies it. You are a thinking, feeling speck on a tiny world orbiting a massive star in a galaxy full of massive stars. And instead of disappearing into that scale, you fit into it. Your smallness has a place. You breathe into that truth, a slow, full breath that melts the last bits of tension from your body. You understand now, in a quiet way, that the sun doesn't make you feel insignificant. It makes everything else feel gentle. The star drifts. You drift, and the universe opens around you like a soft, endless blanket. And now, with the journey reaching its final edge, you slip into the wind down. 300-word wind down. Everything around you slows. The sun's glow softens until it becomes a warm circle in a sky that feels limitless and calm. The space between thoughts stretches wider. Your breathing lengthens, smooth and effortless, as though the universe itself is breathing with you. Each inhale feels gentler. Each exhale feels quieter. You drift in a slow spiral. No urgency, no direction needed. Just letting the last moments of warmth from the stars settle across your shoulders like a cozy shawl. The darkness around you isn't empty anymore. It feels full, cushioned, velvety, a place made for rest. Every star in the distance shimmers with the softness of candlelight. Nothing is sharp. Nothing demands focus. You feel the sense of scale fade, not in a jarring way, but like a camera pulling back until all that remains is a soothing blur of light and shadow. The vastness that once stretched in every direction now gently folds itself around you, close enough to feel safe, far enough to feel infinite. Your thoughts move slower now, drifting the way dust floats in a sunbeam. You let the weight of the day slip off your body, piece by piece, like you're shedding layers you no longer need to carry. The sun's glow remains with you, not as heat or brightness, but as a quiet presence, steady, patient, timeless. You sink deeper into the quiet, feeling your body get heavier, softer, calmer. The universe holds you with the same gentleness it uses to cradle planets and stars. And in that gentle cradle, your eyes grow heavier, your breath steadier, and your mind drifts toward rest. You are safe. You are small. And everything is exactly where it needs to be.